Jason stepped off the transport shuttle and into the dry, golden landscape of Drozari. The air smelled like hot desert sand and faintly of something unfamiliar. He adjusted his backpack, feeling the weight of the unfamiliar atmosphere press against him, but he was excited. This was his first time on an alien planet, and Drozari, a world known for its vast deserts and peculiar life forms, was the perfect place to begin his year-long exchange program. Drozari had been chosen as a part of the Galactic Cultural Exchange, and Jason had been selected to represent Earth. He was here to study alien life and culture, and to learn from a completely different perspective. The planet was far from Earth's green hills and blue skies, but it promised an adventure that no one on his home planet could deny. As he stepped onto the rocky, sun-baked ground, he glanced around, wondering how many other humans had visited this world. The possibilities seemed endless, the excitement bubbling up in his chest like a child's first visit to a zoo. He was soon greeted by his alien landlady, Zarnexa, whose 6 arms moved gracefully as she extended one toward him in a gesture of welcome. Her tall, glowing figure was hard to miss, her skin the color of soft blue glass, shimmering in the harsh sunlight. Jason had read a lot about the Drozarians, their translucent bodies and the way they communicated through color shifts and strange, subtle body movements. But seeing one up close was a whole different experience. Zarnexa's eyes were bright purple, wide like 2 suns, and they watched him with a curious, almost predatory intensity. She looked down at him with a tilt of her head, her nose worms twitching in what Jason had learned was a sign of greeting for her species. He smiled awkwardly, adjusting his stance under her piercing gaze, and then she spoke in a voice that echoed with the strange melody of Drozarian speech, though it was perfectly intelligible to him through the translator implant in his ear. "Welcome to your room, human," she said. The words were strangely formal, but warm, and her 6 arms shifted again, as if offering to show him inside. Jason nodded eagerly, stepping forward, his boots crunching on the fine, sandy floor beneath him. The door to his new home slid open with a gentle hiss, revealing a small yet cozy room. The walls were an odd mix of organic and artificial. They seemed to be soft, pulsing with a life of their own, almost breathing, like the living spaces were a part of the planet's own ecosystem. The temperature in the room was comfortable, though Jason could feel the dryness of the air and the way his skin prickled slightly, a constant reminder that he wasn't on Earth anymore. He stepped further into the room, his eyes scanning the furnishings. The furniture was strange but functional. There were soft, flexible seating pods that could change shape at will, and glowing crystals in the corners provided a gentle, soothing light. It was a far cry from the familiar feel of Earth homes, but Jason liked it. It was different, and that, he thought, was exactly what he wanted. "You can rest here as long as you need," Zarnexa continued. "If you need anything, just press the slime bell," she added, gesturing toward a small, strange-looking device on the wall. It looked like a glistening green slime oozing from a tube, but Jason could tell it was a communication device, perhaps designed to alert her if anything went wrong. "Thanks," Jason said, feeling slightly overwhelmed by the strange surroundings. He didn't want to seem rude, so he nodded politely. He knew his new life on Drozari would be full of surprises. But he was ready. He had always wanted to see the galaxy, to understand life beyond Earth's limited boundaries. This exchange program was his chance to learn more about these beings, their cultures, their worlds, and their technologies. The stories of past explorers flashed in his mind, tales of adventure, of awe-inspiring discoveries, and the unexpected friendships formed between species. As Zarnexa turned to leave, Jason heard her soft voice again. "I will return in 2 hours to ensure everything is satisfactory. Enjoy your stay, human. Thanks again," Jason called after her. She nodded once and exited, leaving him alone in his new home. Jason looked around, running his fingers along the soft, breathing walls. The air smelled oddly sweet, a blend of something floral and metallic. He smiled to himself, feeling a sense of wonder at everything. He had never felt so far from Earth, and yet somehow this place was starting to feel like it could be home. But before he could sink into his thoughts, he remembered something important. He went to his backpack and pulled out a small box. Inside was a little creature, a tiny sandworm from Earth's Mars colony. The sandworm, named Sandy, was his companion on this journey. Sandy was small, about the size of a hot dog, and had a wriggly, segmented body. Its tiny eyes blinked up at Jason, and it made soft purring noises, happy to be in his company. Jason had rescued Sandy from a research lab back on Mars. The little creature had been abandoned, and Jason couldn't stand the idea of leaving it behind. The sandworm was harmless, a small and cute creature that had become an unlikely pet for him. He gently placed Sandy in his pocket, the little worm wriggling contentedly as it settled in its warm, dark place. "All right, Sandy, this is our new home," Jason whispered, smiling as the worm made a soft chirping sound in response. It wasn't much of a conversationalist, but its company was enough to make Jason feel less alone in this vast, strange world. As Jason finished unpacking and settled into the soft, shifting furniture, he began to feel the pull of sleep. His eyes grew heavy, and with one final glance at his new surroundings, he lay down. The bed, made of some pliable material, adjusted to fit his body, offering comfort that he never could have imagined on Earth. Sandy, content in its little hideaway, curled up in his pocket. Jason's last thoughts before drifting into a peaceful sleep were about the adventures that lay ahead. He could already sense that Drozari would be a place of endless discoveries. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, new encounters, and, he hoped, new friends. And as he closed his eyes, he couldn't help but feel that perhaps the biggest surprise of all was still to come. Jason awoke to the strange sounds of the Drozarian morning, a mixture of soft clicking, distant humming, and the occasional chittering of the planet's unique wildlife. His eyes fluttered open, squinting at the dim golden light seeping in through the soft, pulsing walls of his new room. The temperature was comfortably warm, but the dryness of the air reminded him constantly that he was on an alien world. A feeling of both excitement and nervousness swirled within him. His first night on Drozari had been uneventful. The bed, while soft and adaptable, had felt strangely alive as it adjusted to his body, but that was nothing compared to what lay ahead. He hadn't even begun to scratch the surface of this world. Stretching, he swung his legs over the side of the bed, his feet touching the cool floor. As his body began to wake up fully, he felt the familiar sensation of a small creature stirring in his pocket. Sandy, his tiny sandworm, had become something of a comfort during the night. The little creature, with its soft purring, had curled up in the pocket of his pants, warm and content. Jason smiled, thinking back to the little worm's journey with him from Earth's Mars colony to this faraway world. Sandy had been with him through many strange and difficult situations, and now, as Jason stood up and prepared to face the day, the little creature was one more source of comfort. He carefully reached into his pocket to check on Sandy, his fingers brushing against the worm's soft, segmented body. The worm blinked its tiny eyes at him, chirping happily, content in its cozy home. Jason gently petted its smooth body before placing it back in the pocket of his pants, where it wriggled deeper into the folds of the fabric, its soft movements barely noticeable. Sandy was calm, as always, and Jason couldn't help but feel a wave of affection for the little creature. It had been a reminder of Earth during his journey, something familiar in an unfamiliar world. After adjusting his clothes and grabbing a few supplies, Jason stepped into the bathroom area. The space was unlike anything he had ever encountered before. There were no mirrors or traditional plumbing systems. Instead, the walls were lined with soft, glowing materials that seemed to change color with every movement. There was a mist in the air that refreshed him, clearing the dry sensation in his throat. He washed his face with the refreshing mist, feeling more awake with each passing moment. The water didn't come from a tap. Instead, the mist filled the space, cool and invigorating, as though the room itself was alive and aware of his needs. He ran his hands through his hair, still trying to wrap his mind around the fact that he was on a completely different planet. The novelty of it hadn't worn off. He felt like a tourist, albeit one with a very important mission. The Galactic Cultural Exchange was more than just a chance to learn about alien life. It was an opportunity to bridge the gap between two worlds, two cultures, two species. Jason knew that understanding aliens was more than just studying their biology or technology. It was about learning how they lived, how they thought, and how they experienced the universe. There was so much to discover, and he was only beginning. Finishing his routine, he went back to his room, still thinking about the day ahead. He had a meeting with Zarnexa, his landlady, who had arranged a tour of the nearby city of Solari, a bustling metropolis built under the harsh Drozarian sun. Solari was the capital of Drozari, and it was home to creatures and beings from all over the galaxy. Jason's heart raced with anticipation. He would finally get to see the heart of the planet, to witness firsthand the way Drozarians lived, and perhaps, he hoped, to make some friends. As Jason gathered his things, he felt a peculiar sensation. It was a wriggling, a pressure against his side. He turned, expecting to see Sandy moving inside his pocket, but the worm wasn't just wriggling, it was moving urgently, as if something was wrong. His hand shot down to his pocket, but before he could react, the worm slipped out, falling to the floor with a soft thud. Jason froze, staring at the small creature as it wriggled on the ground. For a moment, he wondered what Sandy was doing. It wasn't like the worm to act this way, but before he could bend down to scoop it up, there was an even stranger sensation, a warm, pressing feeling in his pants, just below his waist. Jason's eyes widened, his mind racing. What in the world was going on? He reached down instinctively, his hands fumbling to free whatever had slipped into his clothes. To his horror, he felt something move inside his pants, something soft, but also strangely firm, and more substantial than the tiny worm. Oh no, he muttered under his breath, starting to panic. He couldn't figure out what was happening. Sandy had always been harmless. It had never been this active. He grabbed at his waistband, trying to pull it away from his skin, but whatever was there seemed to be stuck. Suddenly, there was a loud, mechanical noise, a door sliding open. Jason's heart skipped a beat as Zarnexa's voice called out, echoing through the walls. "Human, are you awake yet? I need to inspect your room." Jason's stomach sank. This was the worst possible timing. With his heart racing, he frantically tried to fix the situation, tugging at his pants, but the warm pressure only increased. It was clear now, something had slipped inside his clothes, and it wasn't just Sandy. Just a second," he shouted, doing his best to sound calm, though panic was rising in his chest. Just a minute." But it was no use. The door slid open, and Zarnexa stepped inside without hesitation, her 6 glowing eyes immediately locking onto Jason. She stopped abruptly, her gaze fixed on him. Jason froze, his face turning bright red as he stood there, struggling to hold his pants in place, still feeling the strange sensation between his legs. Zarnexa's eyes widened, and her voice cracked with surprise. Why are you holding your pants like that?" she asked, her expression a mix of curiosity and confusion. Before Jason could answer, the warm pressure shifted again, and he felt something moving urgently within his clothes. The next thing he knew, Zarnexa's voice rang out in pure, unfiltered horror. "Human, why is there a tiny sandworm between your legs?" Jason's heart stopped. His stomach dropped as his mind scrambled to explain the situation. But nothing, he said, could ever sound normal. The sandworm had somehow made its way into a very awkward position. and now, in front of his alien landlady, he was trying to keep it from causing a scene. Zarnexa's eyes glowed brighter as her arms flailed about, in panic. "What is this? Why is there a sandworm there?" Jason's face burned with embarrassment as he stammered, I didn't mean for it to happen like this. It's just a pet. It's harmless, really." But Zarnexa wasn't hearing any of it. She seemed too stunned to make sense of the situation, her body pulsing with shock. You humans are strange," she exclaimed, still staring at the tiny worm now wriggling free. Jason could do nothing but stand there, wishing, with all his might, to disappear, as his day on Drazari quickly turned from a dream into the most embarrassing experience of his life. Jason stood frozen, his face burning with the overwhelming embarrassment of the situation. The tiny sandworm wriggled wildly between his legs, seemingly oblivious to the chaos it had just caused. Zarnexa, his alien landlady, continued to stare at him in disbelief, her 6 glowing eyes wide with astonishment. Her 6 limbs, delicate and long, twitched nervously, as though she were unsure how to handle the bizarre scene unfolding before her. Her voice, once calm and friendly, was now edged with a mixture of horror and disbelief. "Human, what is happening here?" she demanded, the echo of her words making Jason's panic even worse. Jason's mind raced, frantically trying to come up with a reasonable explanation. What had started as a simple moment of quiet discomfort had now spiraled into a full-blown disaster. He had never imagined that the tiny sandworm, a creature that had been nothing more than a curious companion during his travels, would create such a mess. Sandy, the sandworm, had always been a quiet, harmless creature. But now, with Zarnexa standing in front of him, her eyes filled with confusion and shock, Jason could only manage a stammered response. It's not what you think. It's just a sandworm, a pet. It, got loose." Zarnexa's eyes flickered with something between suspicion and bewilderment. "A pet? A pet? Between your legs?" she repeated, as if trying to make sense of the words. Jason, already mortified, wished he could crawl into a hole and disappear. This wasn't how he had imagined his first real interaction on Drazari. He had come to the planet with high hopes, excited to learn and experience a new world, only to be caught in a situation that could only be described as painfully awkward. The worm, completely unfazed by the tension in the room, continued its frantic wriggling as it tried to wriggle its way free from the tight confines of Jason's pants. It was as if the sandworm itself had no concept of the awkwardness it was causing. Its tiny, soft body slid against the fabric of Jason's clothes, making the already strained situation even more uncomfortable. Jason could feel the worm's movement, the delicate little wriggles pressing against his skin as it moved with a surprising amount of energy. He couldn't help but feel a sinking sense of dread as he thought about how this could all spiral even further out of control. I can explain," Jason stammered, attempting to regain some semblance of control over the situation. He quickly knelt down, his hands fumbling with his waistband in a desperate attempt to free the worm from its unintended prison. But every movement seemed to make the situation worse. The worm twisted and turned, its soft body now lodged awkwardly, making Jason's attempts to free it even more complicated. Zarnexa's reaction only grew more frantic. No, this is not normal!" She stepped back, her alien body pulsing with nervous energy as she raised her arms in shock. "What kind of creature are you? What are you doing with such a thing? Why is it there?" The words spilled out of her as her confusion reached its peak. Jason could tell that her cultural understanding had been shattered in an instant. He could see the swirling mix of confusion and concern in her eyes. In her species' mind, creatures like Sandy, harmless as they were, didn't belong in such an intimate space. The very idea of a creature wriggling in such a way was foreign, and the implications of it left Zarnexa unsure of how to react. Jason, now on his knees and struggling with his pants, had to find a way to salvage this mess. His heart pounded as he finally managed to release the tiny sandworm from its clothing prison, but just as he did, the worm squirmed free in an unexpected move, darting across the floor and toward Zarnexa's feet. The moment the creature crossed her path, she recoiled as if it were some sort of dangerous predator. Her 6 eyes blinked rapidly, and she let out a small, panicked shriek as she backed away from the tiny creature, her delicate limbs flailing. In a mixture of surprise and fear, Jason's stomach twisted in knots as he watched Zarnexa react with such shock. Her entire demeanor had shifted from calm curiosity to sheer terror. He knew he had to act quickly to diffuse the tension, to somehow restore some order to this chaos, but the worm wasn't making it easy. It darted around the room, oblivious to the horror it was causing. Sandy, in its own way, seemed to be enjoying the attention, even if it was negative. "I'm sorry, I didn't mean for this to happen," Jason said, standing up quickly. He extended his hand toward the worm, trying to coax it back into his possession. "It's just a harmless little thing, really. It's friendly." But Zarnexa was not so convinced. She raised one of her long, slender arms, her 6 eyes narrowing as she studied the sandworm with caution. "Friendly?" Her voice trembled slightly, her tone suggesting that she wasn't entirely sure she believed him. "That is no ordinary creature, human. It should not be in such a place." She paused for a moment, clearly trying to understand what she had just witnessed. How did it get there?" she asked, her voice quieter now, though still laced with concern. She hadn't quite wrapped her mind around the idea of a creature like this being so close to its human owner, especially in such an intimate way. Jason took a deep breath, trying to steady his nerves. "Sandy has always been a pet, but I didn't realize it would behave this way. I'm really sorry. It's just a mistake." For a moment, there was silence between them. Zarnexa seemed to be processing what he had said, but her gaze remained fixed on the tiny sandworm, which was now sitting peacefully on the floor. Jason could feel the weight of the moment. This wasn't just a cultural misunderstanding. This was a complete disruption of everything Zarnexa had known about Earth, about humans, and about the way creatures were supposed to behave. It wasn't just the sandworm's location. It was the fact that a human could have such a creature, one that appeared to have no boundaries, no limits, no concept of social propriety. Finally, after what seemed like an eternity, Zarnexa's voice broke the silence. "You humans, you are strange," she said, her tone softer now, though still filled with a mix of disbelief and fascination. "You carry creatures with you, and you allow them to roam free in such places." She took a step forward, her curiosity now beginning to override her fear. "But maybe it is not so bad." She hesitated, glancing at the sandworm with a new sense of intrigue. "Maybe I have misunderstood." Jason let out a breath of relief, feeling the tension start to lift. While he wasn't sure how to fix the damage this had caused, at least Zarnexa seemed to be moving past the shock. He stood a little straighter, trying to regain some of his composure. "I promise, Sandy won't cause any more problems. I'll make sure it stays in my pocket from now on. I'm really sorry for the trouble." He offered a small, sheepish smile, hoping that Zarnexa could see the sincerity behind his words. Zarnexa seemed to consider this for a moment, her eyes studying him carefully. Finally, she nodded, albeit reluctantly. "Very well, human. I will trust you for now. But remember, I expect no more surprises, especially that kind." Jason nodded vigorously, eager to put this awkward incident behind him. He felt like he had survived the worst possible first impression on Drozari, but he was beginning to wonder just how much stranger things would get. One thing was for certain. Life on this alien world was never going to be predictable. Jason had never expected his time on Drozari to be this strange, but he quickly realized that his encounter with Zarnexa had merely been the beginning of a series of bizarre events. After that chaotic moment with Sandy the Sandworm, things seemed to calm down, but the tension in the air between him and his alien landlady remained palpable. Zarnexa, ever the enigma, had returned to her usual composed self, though Jason could tell that the incident had left her with lingering questions about Earth, its inhabitants, and their peculiar ways. While she seemed to have accepted the presence of Sandy, she remained wary, often glancing toward the tiny creature with a mix of curiosity and skepticism. Days passed, and the awkwardness between them began to fade. Jason, ever cautious now, kept Sandy hidden away when Zarnexa was around, ensuring that the little sandworm did not cause any more trouble. But no matter how hard Jason tried to ignore it, the memories of that moment lingered in his mind. He couldn't forget the way Zarnexa had looked at him, her eyes wide with disbelief and confusion. It wasn't just the sandworm. It was everything about Earth, everything that made humans different. He had unknowingly shattered her carefully constructed view of the universe with one simple mistake. Despite the tension, Zarnexa seemed to grow, more comfortable around him, though her attitude was often a mixture of intrigue and suspicion. She would often ask him about human culture, about the odd customs that made Earth so unique. At first, Jason answered her questions with politeness, trying to avoid making things worse. But the more she asked, the more he realized that there was much about his own world he didn't fully understand. What did Earth really mean to someone like Zarnexa, who had traveled the galaxy, seen countless planets, and encountered species far more advanced than humanity? One evening, after a long day of trying to navigate the cultural maze of Drozari, Jason sat on the balcony of his apartment, staring out into the vast expanse of stars. The alien world was strange, its skies filled with purple and green hues, its landscape dotted with towering spires and strange luminous plants that flickered like fireflies in the distance. Despite the beauty, Jason couldn't shake the feeling that he didn't quite belong here. He missed Earth, with its familiar sounds, smells, and textures. He missed the simple things, like a warm summer breeze or the scent of freshly baked bread. Sitting beside him, as always, was Zarnexa. Her 6 glowing eyes were fixed on the horizon, her expression unreadable. She had grown quieter in the days since their last encounter, as though she had decided to give Jason some space. But even in silence, she remained an ever-present figure in his life on Drozari. Despite the strange circumstances of their relationship, Jason had come to respect Zarnexa's strength and wisdom. She was an intelligent being, capable of seeing beyond the surface, of understanding things in ways that humans often couldn't. In many ways, she was the opposite of what he had expected from an alien landlady. Her alienness was not just in her appearance, but in the way she viewed the universe. "You know," Zarnexa spoke suddenly, breaking the silence, "I've been thinking about what happened with the sandworm." Jason tensed, but Zarnexa continued, her voice surprisingly gentle. "It's not that I don't understand that you humans find comfort in strange creatures. It's just different. On my world, we do not keep pets the way you do. Creatures like that are either useful or not present at all." She paused for a moment, seemingly lost in thought. "But I suppose there is something beautiful about the bond between humans and their creatures. It's just strange to see it so intimate." Jason blinked, surprised by her words. He had expected her to bring up the incident with some level of disdain, but instead she seemed reflective. "I get it," he replied, still unsure how to respond. "I guess we're not always the most organized when it comes to our pets. But Sandy's not just a pet. He's more like a companion. I don't know. I guess humans are just built to care for things. It's part of who we are." He smiled softly, though the smile didn't quite reach his eyes. I guess it's a little strange to an outsider. Zarnexa turned her head slightly, her 6 eyes glimmering as she studied him. Maybe, she said, but I think I'm beginning to understand. You humans, you are so unpredictable, so full of contradictions. Sometimes you are irrational, yet at other times you have the most powerful instincts. You care for things, even when they don't make sense. Jason chuckled softly, his gaze returning to the starry sky. Yeah, we've got that flaw. Don't we? We love the things that make no sense. For a long while, neither of them spoke. The distant hum of the city below them provided a calming background to the quiet stillness of the night. Jason wasn't sure what to make of the moment. It was strange, this quiet understanding that had emerged between them. Even after the chaos of that first encounter, it seemed like Zarnexa had come to accept him in a way that he hadn't expected. She wasn't as alien as she had seemed before. There was something deeply human in her curiosity, her desire to understand, even if she didn't fully grasp everything about Earth. As they sat together, a strange thought crossed Jason's mind. Maybe this was the way forward, not just for him and Zarnexa, but for humanity and the galaxy. Maybe the key to bridging the vast chasm of difference between worlds lay in those small moments of understanding. Maybe the only way to truly connect with another species was through the things that made no sense, through the strange and the irrational, the things that united them in their humanity. In that moment, Jason realized something profound. It wasn't the sandworm that had caused the rift. It was their differences. And yet, those differences were what had brought them together in the first place. I think, Jason started, his voice quieter now, I think we'll figure it out. All of us, the humans and the aliens. We might be different, but we're not so far apart. He turned to face her, a slight grin on his face. Maybe next time, we can both keep our pets in check, huh? Zarnexa's lips curled upward slightly, the faintest of smiles gracing her alien features. Perhaps, she agreed. Perhaps we can. And just like that, the tension between them seemed to melt away. The strange bond they had formed, born out of chaos and misunderstandings, now felt like something stronger, something more meaningful. Jason couldn't say for sure what the future held, but for the first time since arriving on Drozari, he felt that maybe, just maybe, he had found his place in this vast unknown galaxy.